hand again, I don't know why.
Good evening, and welcome to the November 7th, 2018 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. We're called to order. First order of business tonight is other business. Discuss and vote Tony Andrews Farm lease agreement.
Yes, Madam Chairman, so a couple of weeks ago, the board discussed and voted the lease agreement with Jeff Andrews, who responded to the RFP. The only condition this board put on the lease was to restrict the use of herbicides. When the town went back to discuss the condition with Mr. Andrews, there was some, I guess, confusion when it was written that the use of herbicides, the herbicides were not going to be used. They're just not restricted herbicides. So restricted herbicides are herbicides that require a licensed applicator's license. The CR allows for the use of pesticides and herbicides following best management practices. This board voted the CR with no conditions to restrict that use. The RFP was based on the CR, and there was no restriction in the, or condition in the RFP to limit the use of herbicides. Mr. Andrew would like the ability to use, for lack of a better term, like over-the-counter herbicides, such as Roundup along the fields and areas like that.
Right, so I think basically what happened was there was some talk about this being in his proposal, but there was a miscommunication as to exactly what was in his proposal. So we need a
amendment just to revote the lease
Right.
agreement without the
Right.
condition of restricting the use of all herbicides.
Right, go ahead, Maureen.
I just had one question.
Sure.
Whether it's over-the-counter Roundup, is there going to be signage so that the public will know when he has applied herbicides, which is the law? I mean, if you're using, you know.
It would have to follow best management practices, so if the best management practices require signage,
Yeah.
then they would have to follow that.
All right, so they also said they were going to use nature, remember?
Yes, and
Yeah.
they're still,
So that's actually more restrictive than best management practices.
so there's
So
still.
is it best management or is
Well,
it nature?
nature's, best management and the nature, what is it, nature's?
Yeah, something,
The point is that we
It
had
wasn't in the
asked
RFP.
for a blanket restriction on
Right.
herbicides, and
right.
that's not what he's agreeing to.
right, I totally
Correct.
understand that it was not in the RFP and that he's going to probably use Roundup either on the fields or in the, you know, it was going to be on the cornfields or whatever. I just think that the public, just like the cranberry bogs, you know, you have to put signage up so they can make a decision if they want to be out there, if he's just applied herbicides. I just think I think by law you have to, but I think whether it's by law, I think just out of your conscience, you would put that up so kids aren't running through Roundup. And if anybody's been watching Monsanto, it's a class action suit for cancer, so.
I'm trying to get the name of,
I mean, if you don't
The
mind using it,
program
then you shouldn't mind
is-
posting it.
the town would have to go back and talk to the farmer about that.
Well, I believe in Massachusetts, if you, especially on public property, I mean, even the playing fields, they have to put the sign up that they've put pesticides or
I know
herbicides down.
pesticides
If
use
that's the
is
law,
on.
I think that
Yeah.
we can
Okay.
assume that the law will be
Well,
enforced.
All
Correct.
right, we'll vote it with, I guess, I'll make a motion to accept with the fact, with the caveat that,
They follow
that they follow
Follow.
best management practices and signage during application of, yeah, they can use it, they just have to tell us.
Follow the protocol
So
and
people
law
can- yeah.
regarding the use of herbicides and pesticides.
Well, even if it's not the law, don't you think that the town, the public should be aware that they're using it?
I think it is, I know They did it
Will
with the,
that null and
Supervisor.
void the lease if he has to put that he's using herbicides and insecticides and pesticides? You don't know? Okay. Well, I guess if it null and voids the lease, we'll just have to move forward and let the public be exposed. Okay. Well, I make a motion to accept the lease as written, with, that Jen will just let us know if it can be done. I don't think we
Yes.
should hold it up any longer, because I
No.
think they've got to get moving on their stuff.
all right, I'll
Thank you.
second that.
All right, any other comment or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you. All right, next we have request for determination of applicability. Jean Rubin, 171 Coonamessett Circle, East Falmouth, for permission to vista prune according to FWR 101810B.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Robert and Naomi Tuckman, 215 Walker Street, Falmouth, for permission to construct and maintain a second-story addition and upgrade the septic system to a Title V sewage disposal system with an increase in flow.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'll recuse myself on the next one.
All right. John Banner, 7 Toledo Street, East Falmouth, for permission to construct a detached one-car garage.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All ayes with one recusal. Next, we have requests for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up, we have Maureen and Bruce Salinger, 166 Meadow Neck Road, East Falmouth, for permission to increase the footprint of the house, expand the deck, renovate portions of the existing house, install required mitigation plantings, and associated clearing, excavating, and landscaping. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. The applicant is here tonight asking for permission to do some redevelopment activities within the buffer of a coastal bank and a salt marsh. I'm going to zoom in on this rendering and get you a little closer. The resource areas in question include a salt marsh, which is shown in this olive green color. Adjacent to that is the boundary of the first flood hazard zone, AE 11, AE 12. There's a non-eroding coastal bank sloping up to the top of the coastal bank, which is, in this case, is coincident with flood hazard zone AE 11. And we've shown the respective no disturbance zone As and outer buffer zone Bs. There is an existing house on the property, and the applicant is proposing to do some renovations that include some expansion, shown in a lighter sand color, as a wraparound deck. And then there's further expansion of the footprint that I'm showing you in this area here, if you can see where the mouse is trying to circle. So the project is a redevelopment project in accordance with FWR 10.18. It's been designed to meet the standards by first not moving closer to the wetland resources than the present primary structure. So the existing structure, closest point to the top of the bank is here, and this expansion is lateral and then wrapping around away from the top of the coastal bank. So we're meeting that standard. In addition, we've calculated the increases in impervious surfaces in zone, no disturbance zone A and outer buffer zone B. And we've noted the math on the plan in the upper right-hand corner. And it indicates that there is an increase in no disturbance zone A of 290 square feet, and we applied a factor of 3 to 1 to that. There's also an increase in outer buffer zone B of 657 square feet. We applied a 2 to 1 factor to that. The total required mitigation planting works out to be 2,184 square feet. We're actually proposing to plant 2,500 square feet of shrub layer mitigation planting, and it's shown in this green color surrounding the home in no places at less than 10 feet from any part of the structure, and it is adjacent to and supplements the existing native buffer that is just seaward of this line. We're also proposing to upgrade the septic system. There's an existing septic system located in this location. And the new renovation will result in one additional bedroom. So we're proposing to basically construct a new septic system and place it out by the street so that the leaching field is in excess of 100 feet from the wetland resources. There'll be a new septic tank. The plumbing will be altered in the house. The mitigation planting was designed to give you that added extra amount of shrub layer, and we're asking for more in lieu of or instead of providing additional trees for some of the trees that we're proposing to cut. We are proposing to cut 4 trees that are very close to the existing house. They're noted to be removed, and we summarized the total number of trees in the caliper inches. But instead of providing mitigation in the form of trees, we're hoping that you will allow us to take advantage of one of the provisions of FWR 10.18 that says any trees removed during the course of redevelopment in Zone A or B must be replaced at a minimum of 1-to-1 or maximum caliper inch per caliper inch, except if the entire lot is already densely populated with native trees. I think if anyone's been out on the site, you would tend to agree that the lot is densely developed with native trees. We could do the trees, but we think that the added shrub layer area is more beneficial and provides a better buffer and is a better situation to protect the environment. We're also proposing dry wells. We've shown those on the plan. There's a limit of work that runs along the edge of the existing vegetation. I think that sums up the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Brendan, did you have anything?
Yeah, Mike, what's the date of that plan that you're showing us?
September 21st, 2018?
All right, just because the wording, some things are flipped around on the notes. I just didn't know if it was a different, he submitted a different one. The tree removal and the impervious surface are just flipped on this.
Oh,
Yeah.
And this one's colored, Mike, so we are gonna need a copy of this one since you're presenting it at the public hearing.
sure, you can have it. They're flipped probably because we blew this up so you could see it better.
That's
All
fine.
the-
If you could just provide a hard copy and electronic copy tomorrow,
Sure,
fine.
happy to.
And then the only thing I suggested to Mike was the 18-inch oak by the septic. I mean, it's outside of jurisdiction, but that should probably come down. Just because those roots are gonna be right in that system.
Yeah, I didn't note that this 18-inch oak that I'm pointing to with the mouse, which is adjacent to the leaching field, very likely needs to be removed. It is outside jurisdiction, but it is right next to the septic system that we're proposing to relocate in that area.
Oh, yeah, and then the dry wall underneath the mitigation plantings, the dry well.
This, yeah.
Yeah. Do we usually plant above dry wells? Or let that happen? I was just looking at the plans the other day.
I
don't think so.
honestly don't know, but I don't believe so.
Not usually.
Not usually.
We can shift the dry well, not a problem.
And that's all I got.
Thank you, Brendan. Mark?
Yeah. When I was out there, I noticed all the property between the house and the water had been mowed down to about a 5-foot, 6-foot height maybe. A lot of scrub pines, a lot of pitch pines and oaks. And it looks like the Dickens, it's really an egregious violation. It's not, I couldn't tell when. It might have been 2 years, might have been 5 years ago. Anyhow, again, this is a situation, Jen, which I think maybe you two, maybe the engineering people should recommend them coming in for a vista pruning permit also. This has clearly been pruned. I don't understand why we don't have a permit in place that says, okay, you can continue to maintain this part of it, but it's a pretty wide, it may be 50 feet wide that's been sort of mowed off. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. That's the only observation I have.
Thanks, Mark. Peter?
Is the walkway different from a dock?
Not really. It's a definition, it's semantics. The walk, I mean, it's really, it's basically to get access out to the water's edge over the salt marsh. It doesn't really serve a function as a classic dock where you could tie a boat to it. I mean, if you look at the plan, the water depths are like 1 foot. They basically use it to launch kayaks in a dinghy to get out into the Hamlin's Pond. So, I mean, we could, I don't know if it's, I don't know that I'd call it a dock.
And with the septic system, I noticed to the right, there are a lot of oak trees. Is that going to interfere with the operation of this septic system?
No, we have no expectation that the oak trees that are shown, I think you're making reference to these, would have any impact. This one oak tree here, I just suggested should be removed because it's very close to the edge of the stone.
No further questions?
Thanks, Peter. Steve?
Thank you. First, I think the site is clearly heavily wooded, and the alternative for expanding the plantings, I think, is a good alternative. I don't see any reason to add any more trees. And I appreciate that the 10-foot buffer around the building was maintained. We've been talking about that a lot, and, well, you've been here for many of those discussions. So I think other than that, I'm happy.
Thanks, Steve.
That's our goal. I know. For me to be happy?
Yeah. Amy?
I just have a question about the limit of work. Seems like in that, I think it's the south, maybe southwest corner there, it looks kind of tight. And then why is it,
Over here?
well, the other corner, actually,
Over here?
yeah.
Okay.
Is that 10 feet?
This little spot here, I don't know, but my intention was to show it wrapping around this pine to demonstrate we're not removing that pine.
Yeah, okay.
I guess alternatively, I could run the limit of work around the pines and put a note, oak trees to remain, but I think I've been sort of trained by some commissioners.
No, I get it.
To show it around the trees.
I agree about the trees, so I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Maury?
I agree about the trees as well. Wooden lot, I think.
I think that's
What do
where I
you do?
learned that.
And drip lines.
Yep, just a dry well, and somebody already picked that up.
Great. Kevin?
I'd just like to second Matt's comments. It's pretty obvious that there's a view cut right there, so they just have to be aware of that.
Madam Chairman, I'm happy to, I will inform my client, but it would be very beneficial if the board somehow,
Wrote it into the conditions?
yes,
It's already gonna be done, Mike.
We will certainly do that.
but I will still relay the
Okay, thanks.
concern.
They're gonna have it in as a finding and a special condition restricting all future pruning
Mhm.
to the regulations and a filing.
And after they build a new house, they might have a different view.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think so.
You're all set, Kevin.
Yes.
Courtney?
No question.
All right, thank you. And I have no questions, but I also want to reinforce that suggestion of Mark's we have discussed. Please.
Motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
All right, anything else from the board at this time? Any comments from the public on this here? All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing, taking it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Closed. Thank you.
No, it wasn't open.
Okay, next, we have continued hearings under a notice of intent. Louis Falcone, 31 Point Road, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to raise and rebuild the existing single-family house, install Title V septic system, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, landscaping, and utilities. And Jen, we are taking these as two separate hearings, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you very much, huh?
Got enough drawings on this one?
No.
Evening.
Good evening. My name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design, and that's the wrong one. Yep, BSS Design, and with me here tonight is Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design to help with this. She did some planting and bank restoration plans. So, as was mentioned, we do have two hearings under two separate notices of intent. One is to rebuild a house, and the other we'll get to is to do some work on the coastal bank. Let me just see, so there's this, okay.
I'm gonna cut the lights back a little bit.
Ooh, okay.
Thank you. Does that make it too dark to read?
No, I can see fine here. I have a nice illuminated screen.
Oh.
This is the GIS map. You gotta pull these up first there. Okay, so the first we have the GIS map. It's outlined in yellow, number 31. House fronts on Point Road. You can see this is on the Nice Neck part of North Falmouth. Point Road, A lot of land up here and elevation in the mid-20s, velocity zone. All of this part of Buzzards Bay is velocity zone, VE elevation 18. And this red symbol, line type along here is a revetment structure. And of course, you have the edge of the high water or the water line and some groins there. Same project, the aerial photo. This is the existing house in here with a large driveway, parking area, a large lawn up here, pretty much up to the edge of the bank. This area here is vegetated, but it's all invasive plants. There's a concrete revetment, retaining or seawall on the abutting property that comes up to the property line. This yellow outline is, on the GIS map, is not correct. There's steps going down for this other house, the abutting house. And of course, there's a very rocky shore, the base of the bank, and out into the water. We have the existing house. The property, as I mentioned, you have the land under the ocean, land subject to tidal action from there up to high water, very rocky beach, boulders at the base of the beach. Actually, this concrete revetment comes up just onto the corner of the property here, and see these neighbors, the abutters steps, stairway down the bank over on this side. The existing house in this location, lawn over here. There's a purple line is the flood zone, VE elevation 18. We have this Falmouth velocity zone running through here. Otherwise, it's all in zone X from there back. Furthest landward resource area, this coastal bank where the land slopes at 10 to 1 or steeper in the velocity zone, and that's this line here with the triangles along it. That's the top of the coastal bank. In a velocity zone, it's a 50-foot coastal zone A through here. So you see the house. The existing house is partly in the zone A. That's 570 square feet in the zone A. 100 foot, the full 100 feet from the coastal bank runs back to here, the zone B. And so the entire house is in either A or B. And then this amount of the paved driveway is in zone B. And the rest here is beyond 100 feet from the top of the coastal bank. So I have some coverage numbers here. As I said, the house is 570 square feet in the zone A, 1,189 square feet in the zone B, and 1883 or so of the driveways in the zone B, a total of 3,442 square feet of impervious surface in your jurisdiction and a large amount of lawn. I have marked on here, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There. 1, 2, 3, 4 cedar trees to be cut down. Here, this orange line is the limit of work. And the next plan is the proposed house. See, the proposed house is larger, but it's moved back about 10 feet further back from the top of the coastal bank. But on the previous plan, I think it was 34 and a half feet. Whoops, I just closed it. Well, and now 45 feet from the coastal bank. You see that line there is the zone A. So you now have 149 square feet within the zone A, and the area of the house and the walk in the zone B is 3,449 square feet, and the rest of this house and all of the driveway is beyond the 100 feet from the coastal bank. Septic system likewise is more than 100 feet from the coastal bank up in this location. This is for a 6-bedroom septic system in this location, and the driveway will enter the same way, but will be rebuilt as it approaches here to have, the circular area and parking and access into the garage here. So as I said, all of this is beyond the 100-foot line. So we have a decrease in coverage in the Zone A and an increase in coverage in the Zone B, where the total coverage in Zone A is 3,442, Zone B is 3,598. So the total increase in coverage is only 156 square feet in Zones A and B, which requires 312 square feet of mitigation. Now, this area here is all natural shrub planting. That's a reduction in lawn of 2,800 square feet. So there's maybe a little corner of it right in here that represents for 312 square feet, but there's almost 2,200 square feet more mitigation. And in there is some the cedar trees to replace the other trees. And of course, these will be the natural shrub planting. This area of the lawn also will be filled so that it will be less steep sloping down there, down toward the water until we get to this area. But this will, combination of making this less steep and of course less coverage in the Zone A, will decrease runoff toward the coastal bank. And it will invariably be a more sandy texture. That's all you can buy as loam these days, is a sandy loam. So it'll be a sandier texture and allow better infiltration of stormwater. And then there's a larger buffer that all of this planting of the native shrubs will have a larger buffer to protect the coastal bank and further reduce any runoff. Might go down toward the coastal bank. That's my part of the presentation. Teresa has we'll talk about the mitigation and the planting plan in this area.
Thanks, Tom.
You all set, Teresa?
I think so.
Have you been here yet with the new?
I did, I was here once, yes. I just wasn't sure how many opportunities there were to plug everybody in. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna see if we can. Nope, that's not me.
Get over to the,
This guy right
yeah, the file.
the file. And should be a new Lexar. Maybe this guy. Nope. What, this one? Nope. Okay, not a big deal. We'll just head back over to Tom's. I just had some photos of the site that I thought might be interesting for the commission to see, but we have included,
Can you not find them, Teresa?
I'm just looking for the thumb drive that I just put in
Yeah,
here.
I can show you.
We've got 2 Lexar thumb drives, but not, oh, wait a minute, I've got it. Here we go, here we go. Sorry, thanks, Chad. Okay, so this will help show some of the mitigation areas. So Tom basically laid out the site conditions, lawn which currently expands from the top of the coastal bank south and toward the existing dwelling. Portions of the lawn are currently extending onto the coastal bank in some areas. In addition to the lawn area that's currently being proposed for planting, we have a significant amount of invasive plant species that have actually moved from the lawn from the coastal bank into the lawn area and then actually growing up and into the house, which doesn't appear to have been lived in for some time. So that's why I wanted to share these photos. So you can see the area that we're calling out for mitigation is this lawn area all throughout here.
In addition to that, the cedar trees that Tom was discussing are over here and will be replanted. And then I wanted to just show that there's actually a lot of bittersweet autumn olive growing directly up into the lawn area, so that will be removed. And I think this is a good example of the invasive vegetation. So this is all autumn olive and bittersweet that's currently invading the lawn. So I'm imagining that somebody's mowing this lawn on a fairly regular basis, and that's really what's keeping the invasives from completely swallowing the house right now. So the mitigation plan itself, as Tom pointed out, there's 312 square feet of mitigation required with the increase in structure. We are proposing that to plant out that 312 square feet, and it's up in this area here, shown in this pinkish red. However, in addition to that, with the new regrading, we are proposing an additional 2,800 square feet of planting, so that we're planting out the entire sloped area at the top of the coastal bank in order to create an increased vegetated buffer and minimize any mowing or disturbance that would happen on that slope at the top of the coastal bank, which will make maintenance for the property owners easier and will also better protect the coastal bank from runoff, from stormwater runoff over the top of the coastal bank. So in total, we're talking about doing, there's 312, so the 156 square feet of increase, 312 square feet of mitigation, 2,800 square feet. And I was just looking for a total for shrubs here. We're replacing 4 eastern red cedars in this vicinity here along the southern portion of the property. Mitigation area will be planted with a total of 145 native shrubs, 340 native perennials, which are not part of the mitigation area itself, but will be part of the buffers, the vegetated buffer. Those will include a mix of native shrubs, native grasses and pollinator perennial species. Of course, all the vegetation debris that's going to be removed as part of invasive species management will be removed from site. Invasive species will be selectively treated with a systemic herbicide, allowed to translocate, and as part of the overall management plan, which we'll discuss as part of the bank restoration, the invasive species will be managed for 3 years. Temporary irrigation required for the first 2 to 3 growing seasons while vegetation establishes. But I think we have a pretty robust vegetated buffer here bordering the lawn that will really help protect the coastal bank, in addition to the small amount of mitigation that's required with the increasing structure. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the proposed mitigation and buffer vegetation plan.
Thanks, Teresa. Staff have anything they'd like to say?
Few things. I was looking at your bank restoration plan for a second, Teresa.
Yeah.
Hang on 1 second. I was gonna ask you, I was looking at your bank restoration plan, where the 2 sneaky little sweet fern are, but now I'm gonna ask you where the 45 sneaky little sweet fern are.
So the sweet fern are not part of the mitigation plan, but they
Okay.
are in part of the vegetated buffer.
Okay.
And there are 2 that kind of go over the top, slightly over the top of the coastal bank.
Yep.
And that you'll see on the coastal bank plan. But the sweet fern is located in this area here. All of the vegetation that's going in the mitigation area is northern bayberry.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
And you're removing the 2 cedars just outside that A zone?
So I believe there's 4 cedars total that are being removed. 4 eastern red cedars are proposed to be removed from within the B zone. And Tom was showing them on his plan, I believe, here. So those cedars are, okay. They're in this B zone area.
They're in there, and then there's 2 right where you just had the little hand.
me see. Yeah, I don't think there's anything, four-seaters are being removed from the B zone, but I don't believe, actually, I have them here. There's 1, 2. Sorry, I should have printed a bigger plan.
Then go south. North.
And there are 2 just within the mitigation zone,
Yeah, right there.
mitigation area.
Your hand's almost on it.
Okay. I don't believe those are being called for removal.
They're being called for removal on Tom's plan.
Okay.
Yeah, they were within 10 feet of it. I think they were within
Yeah,
10 feet.
that's, okay. That's what we thought. Okay, what else? Can we shift that, since we just made Mike or Sully do that, Tom, can we shift that, dry well out of the mitigation?
Oh, this one right here.
Yeah.
Right here.
And Teresa, we're going to need your photos for the record.
Yes, I believe they're in the land management plan, but I
Okay,
will get
all right,
copies of
great.
them for the record, yes.
And that's it. I have a question on just one of the species you're using for your bank restoration, but we'll cover that in a second.
Okay.
Okay, that was it.
Okey dokey.
There you go, Courtney.
Thanks, Jen. Courtney,
No questions right now.
Kevin?
Unfortunately, I went out there a little over a week ago, and nothing had been staked out. And I wonder if you could go over what's happening with this reshaping of the landform there. The reason I'm asking is, if you go out back, especially if you aren't aware that all you have to do is walk next door and walk down a flight of stairs, the only way you can see the beach area is to walk over towards the edge of the cliff. Now, I'm dumb, but I'm not suicidal, so I only got so close to the edge. It was clear enough to see the big boulders down there. But, you show all of these rocks, other rocks down there that I didn't see. But that's because of my angle of observation, I'm assuming.
We're not on the
We're not
revetment yet, Kevin.
on
Huh?
that subject yet.
I know, but then you go back from that now, and how far back will you be going with this new slope?
This is the edge of the existing lawn. I think basically it's only within the existing lawn, maybe a little bit of, there's a little bit right here, there's some that's going into the non-native plants, but otherwise, where this lawn comes down toward the bank the closest, the grading will not go further than what the edge of the existing lawn is now.
Okay.
Only in this one place here where it's not colored in, the green is the mitigation and the extra planting, and so there's a little bit of grading going into the invasive plants right through here.
Okay. One other observation, it's not in our jurisdiction, but any plans to make the driveway entrance a little bigger or a little less scary when you are leaving the street?
Well, it will have to be somewhat bigger probably during construction, but we don't have any plans to really open it up.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly. Maureen?
I guess one of my, out of the whole project, my major concern was the grade changes. We've seen far steeper. This is over 30 feet, only a 3-foot grade change, according to your contours. I don't think that warrants bringing fill in. We have no fill calculations on what you're bringing in. Was it in the narrative? I didn't see it. It could have
No,
been.
but actually, I did calculate them.
Okay, So we have planted slopes and coastal banks and total sheer cliffs. I really like the planting plan. I think that getting less lawn in there is wonderful. And, but I think flattening that out and bringing fill in, we're gonna start bringing in new soil, which means you're gonna bring in a new seed bank of 4 new seed bank area. I don't think the slope is steep enough to warrant bringing in that kind of fill over 3 feet, over 30 feet. So that was my only concern. I think everything else was fine.
Well, it's, 412 cubic yards.
It's a lot of fill.
It's less than the volume of the basement coming out, but it's.
Well, again, if it was a really, I mean, I've seen Teresa bring in front of us on these sheer slopes like this, that they get planted and stabilized, and this planting plan is great choices for that area, so I don't know why we would, it's sort of like now we're adding a new dimension. We're not just denuding and replanting and getting mitigation. Now we're filling, we're gonna, we're in the A zone, we're in the coastal bank, and we're gonna be filling a coastal bank within 100 feet of coastal. I don't know. That's the only thing I had a problem with. I don't know why you have to bring fill in.
Tom, you said that the fill that you're using is less than the volume that you're taking out for the basement,
Yes,
correct? Is that what you just said?
yes.
Then why don't you just use the material you're taking out from the basement? Why are you bringing in new fill, or are you using what you're excavating?
Well, not all of what comes out of the basement will be suitable as fill. I'd have to get
Okay.
the soil test. I mean, it's not loam, of course.
Okay, all right.
It could be stripped, and we could take some out of there. I mean, wherever it comes from. I mean, it's the surface material that
No,
that
I
would be the
understand.
most important. What Maureen was worried about, the seed banking
Yes.
that brought in, and that, I mean, that could be, the loam that's on the surface could be stripped off and perhaps mixed with, organic sandier loam just to make it better, and then put back. But still, we need the 400 cubic yards, some of which could possibly come from the cellar hole.
Mhm.
But I don't really know
Okay.
what all that material is like.
All right.
Well, back to the fill in the bank. We, most of the time, have them plant, when there's a lawn like that, to plant in the lawn.
And it is being planted in the lawn, but we just wanted to fill it first,
Well,
to make it a little more level.
so it's not gonna be a lawn anymore. It's gonna have fill, and then you're going to plant in the new fill. Am I correct, in the new loam?
Yes.
All right, well, that's what I'm saying. Why can't you just plant in that very, very gradual slope? The shrubs and the woody indigenous and your planting plan in the existing that's what we've had many projects.
Yes, and it is going within the existing lawn area, and it's just that the applicant wanted, just coming out of the house, a flatter lawn area.
I know what
Before it slopes down,
what
that's-
its objective is, but now you're coming out flatter, and you're saying that it's gonna prevent runoff over the bank, but now you're flattening, and it's actually, at one point, there's gonna be more of a repose at the end of that.
Yes,
So you're not benefiting, you're totally ripping out all of the stabilized bank right now. It's all stable, all that grass is holding the bank.
Mhm.
And if you just plant in that grass, you have solved the problem, you have no runoff, and you haven't brought in fill from another place. And as you said, it's mostly sandy loam, and it's all mostly comes from recycled, reclaimed soils, which bring in invasives, and now you have a naked seed bank. So, anyway, that was, again, my only concern.
Yep.
That's all, thank you.
Okay. Jamie?
You're moving the house back,
yes,
decreasing the grass,
yes,
increasing plantings.
yes.
what you're thinking. I hate to discourage taking the lawn out by not allowing the flattening. That's my only dilemma for me.
Well, they have to plant mitigation.
Yeah, that's all I
And
have.
we're getting, oh, by the way, I forgot to say, the 4 cedar trees, we have no caliper inches, and we're getting 4 2-gallon cedar trees. And you saw the picture of the cedar trees.
We actually do have a caliber inch on 3 of them.
Okay,
So there's 3 10-inch cedars according to Teresa's plan.
right, but we have no caliper inch of what's being replanted. They're 4
No.
2-gallon plants. They're this big, they're as big around as my thumb.
So, just a couple of things that I want to note about the existing lawn area and going back
So,
to
share with Kevin.
the photographs. The existing lawn area is currently degraded. It's really overrun. The only reason that it's not, so my recommendation would be to manage this entire lawn area. So there's going to be machinery back here. We're going to be bringing and doing mechanical removal at the top of the coastal bank and in the buffer zone of all of this autumn olive that you're seeing up in this area, right in here, and then over in here, which is then coming into the lawn. So there's going to be a lot of disturbance in this area
What
as part of.
mechanical are you using?
We've listed it, well, it's actually in the land management plan, so we'll discuss it further in the next hearing, but we're using a mini excavator and a skid steer.
And why can't you just flush cut them and leave the roots to hold the bank?
So we are going to be doing that on steep slopes on the bank, but the biomass here is so significant and it's all invasive. It's just nothing but invasive. So frankly, in areas where we're working with either on really steep slopes or we're working with a mix of invasive and native vegetation, then we're hand cutting and removing. But in areas like this where we're going to be stabilizing immediately after we remove the invasive species, and it's all invasive vegetation, we're going to mechanically remove. So that's one thing. We can certainly put in larger cedars. The only thing that we're finding in areas up in this area, and there's some other areas in town, down on Gunning Point, for instance, that large cedar trees that generally you're purchasing commercially are coming from the south. We're planting them and they're succumbing to desiccation, usually in late winter, early spring. So we're out there spraying anti-desiccants on them through the entire winter. And then what we've been seeing over the past several years is our spring weather has actually been more harsh than our winter weather, and we're losing the plants in March and April. So that's why we've been proposing smaller cedar
I'm not
trees.
against the smaller plants. I'm
Yeah.
against that we have 4
Yeah, for about
thumb-size
six-
cedars, not like 15 or 20, because we all know they like to grow in a cluster.
right.
That you're not planting
Mhm.
15 or 20 of these little thumbs. You can go rip them out of the ground anywhere. I mean, it's not like they're a big
Right.
deal.
But
Maybe
they
you should go
definitely
get some
have
little
a
native
greater
ones.
survivability rate. So, I mean, if the commission feels comfortable, we could certainly put in more than 4 of the smaller
Like about
cedars. That
30.
wouldn't be an issue. Well, I think 30 might be excessive, but perhaps we could come up with a number that would fit in this area, because we also have to realize that over time, the next 20 years, these are going to grow to mature sized trees, and if we put in 30, they're just going to be crammed, and we'll be cutting them down to remove some of them. So I think if we put in a few more, that wouldn't hurt, but perhaps not 30 would be inappropriate for the space.
Middle ground.
That's all I had to add on those 2 points.
I'm so done with this whole commission at this point.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Okay, Steve.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
I'm off
Peter.
to work. It's Christmas.
I appreciate house moves back and the less grass near the sensitive area. I appreciate the fact that the cesspool is being converted to Title V. Perhaps, Tom, maybe you could clarify to me what the advantages would be to the ecosystem for a more level back lawn. Not the advantages to the owners, but the advantages to the ecosystem.
I think the advantage, one advantage, I believe, the present lawn slopes at a certain amount, and it's not very steep, but there's some runoff from it. making that less steep with a healthy turf growth will slow down, not eliminate, but slow down the flow of water from the house area toward the bank. So I believe it will slow down in smaller rains eliminate, and in larger rains, slow down the flow of water toward the bank. If it's built with, if the lawn is built up with a sandier mixture built into it, it'll be more pervious and infiltrate more of the water. As it is more slowly moving downhill, more will have a chance to infiltrate.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Thanks. Mark?
Is the revetment work going to be done first?
It would have to be done.
You can't get by the house with
Right.
machinery, otherwise.
Yes.
How much, do you have to do any digging or filling or something at that so-called staging area where I presume you base the crane?
Yeah, we haven't got there.
Oh, that's the
This
next
is only
permit.
for the
I'm
house.
sorry.
That'll be for
No,
the next.
no questions.
All right. All right. Anything else down here?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
Second.
All right. Anything else from the board? Teresa, did you have, it looks like you have something, or are you just closing up?
I was just gonna close the pictures
Oh,
for
okay.
Tom for the next hearing,
Fine.
sorry.
Any comments from the public or questions? All right. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Hey, Tom, Brendan uploaded a bunch of pictures of the revetment, if you want to use those yours, Tom? No, those aren't yours. Oh, okay.
The photographs, it appears to me, are in the management plan that we have.
No, I'm talking about for the revetment, Brendan went down there, and for those who didn't scale down the bank, I just thought it would be easier if you guys could see it if you didn't make it down there.
Gotcha. Thank you. Bungee down. All right, now, if I can find
Yeah, I
mine.
guess. I don't need it, so.
All right, so, next hearing is the same applicant, same property, Louis Falcone, 31 Point Road, Falmouth, for permission to reconstruct a coastal revetment, construct stairs on the coastal bank, and remove invasive vegetation and replace with native woody shrubs and grasses.
I don't know where mine went.
Looks familiar.
I kind of have the same, sorry, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design, representing the Falcones, and still with me here is Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design. I was saying I have the same GIS map. The focus of this project is right down along the shore in this velocity zone V18, down this stony area, and actually the brown area, which when this photo is a wintertime photo perhaps, or something, it's where there's, the foliage is down on that right there. So in our plan view, we have this Buzzards Bay tidal from low water line up to high water line. And the concrete seawall on the west side of the property over here, and the butters wooden steps coming down. And then there's a path that was cut down that some daredevils walked down, some didn't. And what I've drawn on here, highlighted again, are the A zones. So within the A zone of land subject tidal action, a zone of land under a water body, a zone of coastal beach, and the work we're proposing is on the coastal bank. What I've drawn in the green here, shaded in the green, is the existing lawn work, and so what we've shown a limit of work through here in this staging area for a crane to set up work and do from the top. There'll be no access from the bottom, so to get right to it, yeah, that would have to be done first to get equipment and some loads of stone around the side of the existing house, or to get over here to put down and build it. So again, this triangular line is the top of the coastal bank. This entire area is within the velocity zone. So what we're proposing, just to give you an overview, is this area, and the green is the bank restoration that Teresa will explain. The intent is to build, this is a low revetment. Get right to here's the picture from the water, with some lines drawn over it. And so when we were at the site, I was there with some of the staff, with Jen and Brendan. So it would suggest that we might be able to get this built up about to the height of some of the stones that are existing. So we have this stone right here, and this large stone here, and carry it across. And you see the other stones that are here, and then up to that elevation, which is 9.2, hits the concrete wall right at the top of where the stones are now, in that area. It's 2 feet below the top of that concrete wall. So, you know, I've drawn in the sort of the black outline of stones, not necessarily to scale, but to give an idea of that's what it's going to do. And in section, of course, these steps, you know, just run straight up the bank, up to the lawn area. In the plan view, you see the steps going up, but what you don't see in that elevation is there's a landing, and you don't see the depth from front to back of this. So we have the stones of the new revetment wall running back here, you know, landward of the existing. There's that big boulder that was shown there, and so we're staying behind that and just working way up to this concrete wall here. See, the ones that are labeled are actually measured boulders there. And this is about 6 feet high. Just a couple of stones high, and then up to elevation 9.2, and then the 9 contour is at the back of this olive green area. So what we've worked into it is so in this section, the one at the top left, the section shows the steps going up. This will be done out of just standard granite tread stock, 4 feet wide, 8 inches or 7 inches high, 18 inches deep, climbing up the bank at roughly, the bottom would be roughly 11-inch run of tread, and up toward the top it's a little less steep, about 11-inch run between risers going that way. And then there's an area about 7 or 8 feet flat, which we've drawn on this darker gray area is proposed to be just a flat stone area made out of some of the broken stone, split stone, or some of the tread stock as a little, I don't want to call it a patio, but a little place where perhaps some beach chairs could be set up. The olive-colored area is, you see the section at the bottom, revetment cross-section. When you're building the revetment, we have the details of putting filter cloth where we can underneath the new part of the revetment so that it's not all undermined. But then because we have this width from front to back, we're going to lay a bed of the smaller stones through there and filter cloth. And so this area be filled with sand and planted with, in Teresa's words, bitter switchgrass and seaside goldenrod. Basically a dune habitat. So we're creating this habitat area here, which doesn't exist now. And all of this green is improved habitat from the removal of the invasive plants that are up and down that bank, and replacement with all native vegetation. And it will merge on this plan. You can see where these proposed contours are, and it's not colored in here, but that extra native planting will come up to this top contour that runs along here up by this top granite tread stock up here. So almost all of this area that you see on this plan will be planted with native plants. And this is, so I feel this is partly, it's building this up as support for steps to get up and down the bank, which they should be able to do without killing themselves. And as I said, it's in the narrative, it says this is to be built, it was requested when we were there to build it as an irregular face, not the typical kind of flat stone that will deflect wave energy, but an irregular rough face out of the stones that will break the waves and absorb wave energy. And as I said, it's only about this high. It's only about a quarter of the height of the entire bank that you see behind there. So we're hoping you're not considering it. It's not armoring a coastal bank. It's putting some more stones down at the bottom, increasing habitat area, the amount of habitat there, and habitat quality. Those are the sort of the engineering aspects of it, and Teresa has some words to say about that bank restoration plan.
Thanks, Tom.
Just quickly open up the land management plan. Whoops. Okay, so starting with the planting plan. Actually, you know what, I'll start with the land management plan first. So we've kind of already gone through the existing conditions. Just some of the highlights on the existing conditions that we already discussed. So estimated 90% of the vegetation on the coastal bank is comprised of invasive species, including autumn olive, Asiatic bittersweet, border privet, shrub honeysuckle, vine honeysuckle. We did find some bayberry on the coastal bank. It's very few, northern bayberry, and they are currently being overrun by invasive plant species. The understory and the areas beneath the invasive plant species virtually void of ground cover, with the exception of the turf lawn and the upper areas that Tom pointed out. Of course, as you know, areas lacking ground cover are more vulnerable to erosion from either stormwater runoff or flood events. The management plan, the goals of the management plan on the coastal bank are pretty simple and straightforward.
Excuse me, Teresa.
Oh, sure.
Ma'am, we're not allowed to close the door. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So the goals are pretty simple and straightforward. We want to increase the protection of the resource area, enhance the integrity of the buffer zones in order to provide functions as defined in WPA and Falmouth Wetlands Protection Regs, managing invasive plant species, providing a mix of diverse native plant species appropriate to the site conditions, and we can talk about the choice of the bitter panic grass, as Tom pointed out, the Panicum amarum, and to protect the stability of the steep slopes on the bank. In addition to that, improving wildlife habitat value and function by improving the habitat by removing the invasive plant species and restoring native vegetation. So we believe that this plan, in combination with the proposal to provide a reduction in impervious surface within Zone A, as well as a more enhanced vegetated buffer, will offer a significant protection for the coastal bank. So as far as the plan goes, it's pretty straightforward. We're proposing to remove the invasive vegetation. Of course, we will protect the native vegetation that we have on the bank, generally by flush cutting and allowing it to regenerate because it's so overgrown at this point. Our fear is once we remove the invasive vegetation, bayberry in particular, viburnum similarly, tends to snap as soon as it's exposed to wind. So we'll flush cut and allow that to regenerate. We're proposing to plant 186 shrubs on the bank. There are 2 of the sweet fern, as Jennifer noted, on the northern section of the plan that crept into our blue area, but we wanted to make sure that we call them out, so those are right here. In addition to that, we are proposing a couple of inkberry holly, not on the bank itself, but in these upper areas in here. So that vegetation, that what we're calling the coastal bank restoration and invasive species removal, is wrapping all the way around the property, so that the new vegetated buffer planting will also wrap right along with the invasive species management restoration areas. The species that we're proposing on the bank consist mainly of northern bayberry. We are proposing a little bit of Rhus aromatica and some Virginia rose here towards the top of the coastal bank, as well as arrowwood viburnum and winterberry holly. As far as the area that Tom is discussing here, this flat area at the top of the revetment, because there was this flat area, it seemed that there were 2 opportunities. One was to backfill it entirely with stone, the other to backfill it with some stone and then fill it with some sand and plant it with native vegetation. We know that there's going to be a lot of salt water exposure in this particular area. One of the plants that Tom had asked us about was using American beach grass, Ammophila, and my only concern with that is that Ammophila works really well in a dune system and thrives in a dune system because it's constantly being recovered with sand. In this case, because there won't be consistent sand nourishment proposed for this area, we think that using Panicum amarum, salt-tolerant switchgrass, along with seaside goldenrod would be more appropriate. Our concern is that if we used beachgrass, Ammophila breviculata, it would thatch out over time and simply die. I do think the Panicum amarum will do better in this situation, so that's why we're proposing those 2 species in particular. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the bank restoration. One other point, as I pointed out in just a few minutes ago, mechanical removal will happen at the top of the coastal bank, but on these steep areas, this will all be hand removal. Invasive vegetation will be cut, it will be selectively treated, we'll be winching it or carrying it up the bank and removing it from the site so that the stumps of the larger shrub honeysuckle autumn olive that are on these steep portions of the coastal bank will be left in place. They'll be treated selectively with a wetland-approved herbicide, systemic herbicide. The whole bank will be blanketed with 100% biodegradable erosion control blanket immediately after the invasive species removal is completed and the area is seeded with an appropriate seed mix.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks.
Mark, Jen? No?
Yeah, oh no, I have a few questions.
Okay.
I didn't mean to make noise, I actually bumped that by accident before, I was like, so first, does the board need Brendan to bring up his pictures, or was Tom's photos enough for the board to, for those who didn't scale down, for those who were suicidal and scaled down?
Do you have pictures of the revetment from down below?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I just see those?
Yeah. Brendan will bring them up for you. So, we did meet outside, on-site with Tom, and the property owner, Brendan and I. And this is one of those very unique, not unique, but just difficult situations for staff to guide them on what might be acceptable to the board. So we did say that they probably would not be allowed to bring the height of that revetment or repair up past those stones that Tom showed you with that kind of overlay. Okay? So that's the first thing. Second thing, I'm more in favor of having the sand behind that as opposed to bringing that revetment up further. So, we have to kind of look at that. The only other thing, Teresa, I have a few questions for you. Where did you go? Okay, I know it's too sneaky sweet for an R. One of the things is, so when are your ideal timeframe?
The ideal timeframe to do the selective removal on the bank would be when the revetment is being done. So I don't know what kind of excavation, and Tom can probably answer this, or if any kind of excavation has to be done, or if there's simply going to be craning stones over the top of the bank and placing the stones. But there will be some disturbance in this area, so it absolutely should be done immediately after the stones are placed.
Okay, and how long do you need, if I missed it, I'm sorry if I was out dealing with some noise. How long do you need the plants to sit? And I know this, I've seen many of your presentations, but I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
For the herbicide to work. So
So
once you cut, drip, and blanket, how long is the blanket gonna stay on there?
The blanket will stay on there. We'll be planting directly into the blanket. So we'll be seeding, we'll be cutting, dripping. We'll do a pre-treatment to start. So
Yep.
we'd like to do a pre-treatment at least 2 weeks before we're gonna
Okay,
cut
2
and
weeks.
remove.
So
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not gonna be exposed over a winter season or anything like that.
I don't know what the timeline is for revetment construction. Is that?
As asked before, that revetment, as I said, that would have to be done before the house, and of course, they
Okay.
want to get going.
When is that?
No, what I'm wondering is if Teresa cuts and drips and blankets, is it this whole area or that area gonna be completely exposed over the winter storm months? That's what I'm asking.
It would be. So if we
Okay.
were to cut and drip immediately, so if they were going to start the revetment work, let's say in a month.
December, yeah.
Right, in December, and we were to start the invasive species management then the area would be seeded and blanketed, and blanket would be protecting the bank for the
Yeah,
rest of the
okay.
winter. Yes.
And the use of viburnum dentatum on the slope. I see how you have it kind of designed in there, but you have some of it closer down to that,
To the top of the revetment.
closer to that sand
Yep.
planting area.
Yes. Let's see what we
Do you
have.
think there's gonna be too much salt spray for the dentatum?
Yeah, I think we could.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I agree. I think we could easily flip that with the bayberry and plant the bayberry down closer to the top of the
If you
revetment.
didn't want monoculture, would beach plum be a better choice in that area?
Yeah, beach plum could work really well. It's a north-facing bank, so it's not super sunny. So we chose species that would tolerate more shade, but we could certainly try some beach plum in there.
Yeah, I mean, where you have the dentatum further up along where's that arrow?
We've got it down,
Yeah,
right down in,
right
right
down
there.
there,
yeah,
and further along,
Right
up
up
along
here.
the property boundary, I think would be fine,
yep,
but right on that
yeah,
bank, yeah.
I
I'm
totally
just-
can see where you're going with that.
I
We
was
could,
like,
yeah, we could definitely add some beach plum into this area.
and just reduce the viburnum
Yeah.
that close to
Yes,
to the top of that revetment. I just think the salt spray is just gonna
cook
torch
it. Yep, I agree.
That is it for right now. Brendan, anything?
You covered it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, great.
Oh, one more question, I'm sorry, Teresa.
Yeah.
The small amount of bayberry, because we did notice some bayberry when we were out there.
There is,
You're
yeah.
leaving that?
It will
or-
be. So what we'll do is we'll remove the invasive vegetation around it. If it's really leggy because it's grown up,
Yeah.
we'd flush cut it and allow it to regenerate. Yeah.
All right.
All set?
Yes.
Maureen?
The only question I had is, does that revetment need a Chapter 91 where it touches the water?
No, it doesn't touch our delineation of high water. Let's say some of it over the far, let me see, at the, so we have,
Well, is that the property line that I'm looking at? Do they own some of that seawall?
at the, well, let's say the work that we're doing does not touch high water, but some of that existing stonework below the concrete seawall does touch high water.
So you'll have to get that license.
So I guess there's a small amount that would have to be licensed.
We'll
from
have
there.
to license that.
Yeah. You're
Okay.
right.
And the reason I'm asking, the way your picture shows and where the boulders are, there aren't really, I mean, there's some small rocks. I mean, those boulders are when they, back in the day, when they used to dig the cellar hole and roll them off the bank. Because now it's a substantial and they're gonna tear the house down, so there's no problem with no house being there. So, because this is a legal revetment now. Okay. Because once the house is gone, once they tear the house down, you can't revet. So, I mean, this is enough of a existing structure that it would be okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I do believe
okay.
so. I mean, like I said, it's one of those, we went down there, it's one of those really difficult situations, especially along this area in North Falmouth. You have all that unconsolidated
Yeah.
boulders, and it's
not
like,
really, it was,
is it a revetment, isn't it a revetment? It's kind of scattered, you know? Staff makes the best
Yeah.
kind of
okay, as long as you're.
determination in the field that we can and guide them as best we can with these kinds. I mean, it's not your classic revetment.
No.
We see this along Gunning Point, we see it near Fiddlers off of Eldridge, in this area. You know, it's kind of difficult, so we do.
And one of the nice things about those, the old school kind of, stone rubble, they weren't faced
Right.
slant, that they actually did
break up
the water, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm looking at this, that, we're kind of.
And that's what I think they said, they're gonna leave it kind of
Just,
jagged.
leave
Yeah.
it randomly jagged and,
Right.
because I think that as soon as you start manicuring it into a real revetment,
It
that
takes them more.
it's
No,
gonna
that-
take a
that's-
hit, and you're gonna start having an eroding coastal bank.
No, that was the
And-
intent, and if there's
Okay.
any good wording.
Yep.
mean,
And I
we'll
like the
just
way
have-
you did where you're gonna have that backfill, to plant that so that it takes a little more of a buffer. One of the questions on the land management timeline, I've been going to some of these projects, and like everything, it always starts off with gangbusters, which is when we spray the herbicides and rip everything out. That always starts off at a really good clip. My concern is this is a 3-year plan. If these projects take a long time.
Yep.
And this is a big project, I mean, the revetment is not gonna happen overnight. It'll be the whole winter. And I'm looking at your plan, and you have for the first winter, into the summer, the invasive species in planting. You skip spring everywhere in the first year, so I guess you're not gonna do anything in the spring?
So we generally don't apply herbicide in the spring because it's just simply not as effective.
I wasn't talking, but no planting, no nothing in the
We
spring?
we'd like to wait one full season before we do planting, so we're proposing to plant in the next fall so that we have an opportunity to do follow-up invasive species management throughout the first season. So, for instance, if we were to undertake the initial intensive phase this winter, we would like to follow up because we know we're going to have some resprouting and we know there's a significant seed bank. So we're going to have to do more follow-up selective management through next season and then plant in fall of 2019.
Well, you don't have that in here, you said you're gonna be planting in the summer.
I'm sorry?
You have it down as planting in the summer.
So it would be late summer, then early fall. That's generally what we wouldn't be
Well, no,
planting.
because then your next planting, you say your irrigation needs for upcoming growing. you only have planting for the summer, the first year. You don't have any other planting.
So we would do-
Reading this wrong?
Right, so
This is
year
just
one,
irrigation.
we would have, year one would be after the year one, year one would be after we do the initial invasive species management. So we have, if 80% of control of invasive species has been achieved, commence planting of woody vegetation. So yes, that summer we would do late summer, early fall. We would never plant between July and August. But we
So
would,
all the planting will be done
correct, in 2019,
in the end of summer of 2019.
correct,
All right.
yes.
And then you're putting irrigation in the winter.
Planning needs for upcoming growing season and installing
Okay,
irrigation
So
in
you're
the
not gonna
spring.
water them the first year, the first fall?
Not the first fall. We'd water them immediately after planting, and then they would be on their own, and then we'd follow up with watering the next spring. So if we plant in September,
You're saying you're planting in the summer, that's not September.
well, September's a summer
Okay,
month.
all right, as long as, all right, I just wanna make sure.
Yes.
Well, I look at these and I'm
Yeah.
just concerned of the time frame.
Yeah, we can be much more specific if you'd like. I mean, generally, we would be planting in late summer, early fall.
Early fall?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right, and then, that's all. I just wanna make sure that
Yep.
this gets planted the first year, because you're gonna run out of time by the third year.
Absolutely. No, our goal is always to plant as soon as possible. The only thing we don't want to do is plant immediately after we do the initial. So if we did the initial invasive species management in the fall, and then we planted immediately in the spring, let's say we did this December, we did the invasive species management.
That's what you say you're gonna do.
And
Yeah.
then we planted in,
Yeah,
yes, year one, year two. So we do the planting, we do the initial invasive species management in December. We would not want to plant in April or May. We'd want to wait that full
Right.
season,
Right,
yes, to
okay.
do management.
all
Yeah,
right, same, but it's still in the first year.
it's still in the first
Okay,
year.
thank you.
Yes.
All set?
All set.
Right. Kevin?
All set.
All right. Courtney?
Yeah, the question of the sort of origins of all of this have been covered, so I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Mark?
Is it your plan to use the crane to do all the stonework?
Yes.
It's a long ways from that staging platform to part of the wall, like 80 feet. That's a hell of a long way to reach.
Like,
It's not gonna do
let's
it.
say if we talk with a contractor, we might have to come back in and get authorization for an area on the other side to work
You
from.
may need a much closer than that.
Yeah.
Okay, now you could look at that, you can see really, the next question is, where right that so-called flat stone, and then the area behind it, which is
Right in here.
more or less, it's not quite flat, but it's gently sloping, and you're planning essentially to fill all that in
Yes.
with revetment, so, and that gives you the problem, if you will, of having this flat area you've gotta do something with. Why not just
Well, it's
leave the
not just
beach
that
as it
area.
is?
Even back, see where this boulder is here, that's just sort of a freestanding boulder, and that it's not so much there, but this is, this 9 to 10 foot contour is further back, like in this area here. It could all be built further back and not have that area.
I mean, normally we sort of discourage encroaching on,
Well, that's why I
but
kept
it's
it.
not really a beach, but it could be called a beach.
Right, and that's why I kept it behind these two.
Well, I don't know, the drawing says it looks like it comes right up, ends up on that flat boulder.
Well, the steps do. There's that flat boulder, and then there's like a little, maybe a singular piece of tread stock that's, 18 inches deep, and then the steps go up from that. But there's a line across from this one boulder that sticks up, and it sort of goes straight across to this boulder. Then the rest of it, it just goes in through here, and it's staying back. I mean, it's well back from, obviously from, the revetment on this side, and it's back from these other boulders.
It seems to me you're just pushing right out onto the beach. And you can explain it, but just looking at the drawing, and it looks like you've got that you push the steps out, and then you've got a flat area behind them, which now has to be dealt with some planning or something, which, if you put the steps roughly on the bank, you know, on the bank, then there wouldn't be a flat area, first of all. You wouldn't be encroaching on the beach.
Well, yeah, we had it this way. We thought it was a good opportunity to give you know, it's another eco-type in there. You're right, we could push it back further, though.
Probably better having it lean back, break up the way, avoid having even a planar surface, but more a broken-up surface as far as wave reflections. That's kind of minor, though. I think the only principal issue is we generally discourage moving things out onto the beach, and that looks
Right.
to me like that's what it's doing.
Mhm.
That's all.
Peter?
No questions.
Steve?
No, unfortunately, I don't have any questions. Maureen covered all my stuff.
Jane?
I have nothing.
All right. Anything else?
Make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
All right. Anything from the board at this time? Anything from the public on this hearing? All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye. Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
So there are your pictures.
Next, we have request to amend the existing order of conditions. Stephen and Susan Madden Moore, 125 Little Neck Bars Road, West Falmouth, for permission to construct a vegetated drainage swale and retention basin between the driveway and the wetland.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I do, thank you, Mike. I'll put one of those in the file, too, thank you.
Talked about that.
See a sheet here to say who was here. That one?
Yeah, I would sign it.
I'll just say amended. Okay, that's
Just set up.
Good evening, my name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. We prepared the request for an amended order and the site plan. Whoops, I'm sorry. Yes. What the proposal is that you required us to build, perhaps I should turn this. Well, I don't know how to turn it, there's no view button here. And the order of conditions says that we're supposed to construct a rain garden in the approximate location where I'm showing. And when we looked at the soils and we looked at the groundwater, we think it's much better to put a proposed drainage swale on this side of the driveway. There's landscape and ornamental plantings, and in the request for the hearing to amend it, we did show you that there is, I won't go back. Hold on, I'll get it. There was, that was a pre-existing condition that this area has been altered, so currently, this is the condition on the ground. And to dig this out and put water here, it's just gonna be trapped on this side. But if we construct the rain garden on the other side, and if I go back to the plan, you're going to have the ability for the water to drain into the isolated wetland once the capacity of the new vegetated swale is exceeded. The bottom, rotate clockwise. So
Hey,
what?
you did it, Mike.
Hey, once in a while, even a, never mind.
Don't say it, Mike.
Currently, the cross-section
There you go.
of Section A shows you that with the gravel driveway here, there's a mound, and then there's the isolated wetland. And what we're proposing to do is at the closest end, is they were gonna dig down 12 to 18 inches, and there's going to be a sufficient capacity for runoff to be stored here. And there's two sections, one at the other end, where this is currently what exists, and that's where we're proposing that this drainage structure, that's Section AA and that's BB. So what'll happen is this will be lower than the road, and there'll be a berm here, so it'll then flow over into the isolated wetland once the capacity of this is exceeded. And we've done the best we can as far as the amount of capacity. The groundwater is very shallow here, and we think this is an appropriate solution to the drainage problem that exists there. So that's why we've asked it. We don't think that we can design anything here that would be as effective as this. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Mike. Mark?
Is there any reason why you don't extend it just further south, another 20 feet?
There was a tree in the way, so, but
Oh, that's right.
we could extend it
Well,
if you wanted.
oh, you've got a proposed cupola, and then that, I can't tell what that is, but,
There's an existing tree there.
'cause it looked like there was a lot of water hanging there before you have this.
If the commission wants to extend it, we could, you could condition
So
that.
you
I don't
said,
think it needs to be extended very much.
so you think you have enough storage capacity right now with that design? So it won't overflow into the,
It will overflow into the isolated wetland, and frankly, the isolated wetland does provide significant treatment of any pollutants that might be in this.
just keeps
Because-
any oils and stuff
Yes,
away from
and
the.
it is isolated by itself, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Peter?
No questions?
Steve?
No question.
Jamie? Maureen?
I just had one question, Mike. If you look at the pre-construction conservation pictures and the water that's all in that yard,
Mhm.
that used to be the rain swale right there. But if you look at the back, and if you've been out there, a lot of material was brought in to plant, and they're actually raised beds. So the issue was really caused by creating these humps, and now it's trapped between the two raised garden planting beds. And before, it was where the laurels are, and to the left, in the photograph of the conservation agents. And it used to just sit there and, percolate at some point. And if you look at the driveway, there was no water in the driveway in that picture, but there was a lot of water in that lawn. The whole lawn was redone, resodded, and replanted the planting bed, which was it's a nice native planting bed. The only problem is the fill that they brought in created that. So I don't think, there's not an easy solution to this, Mike, because there's no percolability in that soil, it's all clay. That's why they mounded everything, because you really can't dig. Everything would be the roots would all be in groundwater if you planted them on level ground. But the precedent of just when we get into discharging into a wetland, and I know it's gonna have a little bit of capacity in that swale, which is a benefit. But maybe if they went back to lowering that garden bed, I don't know. That's what created the problem, is that raised garden bed with the split rail fence on the rail. Because the conservation picture clearly shows that as being a very low spot in the driveway, and the right side of the driveway being dry.
Let's step back. You have a condition that requires this twin to be on the other side of the driveway, and it's clear to us it will not work. So for the very reasons that you've discussed, poor soil, and this is, in our mind, the only practical solution. And again, this is an isolated wetland, and the isolated wetland will provide some treatment for the runoff.
Okay.
This is a residential project, and generally, under the state guidelines, we don't have to handle the stormwater management situation. And the other point is, we're doing the best we can.
Yep, and well, and the planting on the lawn side did exacerbate the situation. So that does create another problem all of its own. This is in the DCPC. We will put in, Jen, remind them again that there is absolutely no fertilizing of the lawn.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kevin?
No question.
Courtney?
No question.
All right,
Make a motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
thank you.
Second.
All right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
All right. Request to extend the existing order of conditions. Amy Bouvier, 410 Seacoast Shores Boulevard, Falmouth, Massachusetts, 25-5036, request for a one-year extension.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the staff recommends a one-year extension.
So moved.
Second.
Just starts construction. There's some redesign of the house because of the change in the flood zone maps and.
I can speak on that. I'm actually Peter Langen, and I'm the builder. So I'm here speaking for the homeowners. Just letting you know, yes, as I've already met with Jen, and yes, I've applied for the building permit. Utilities have all been disconnected, so the project really is ready to start now. So other than that, nothing has changed as far as the footprint. I've got the septic, everything is ready to go, and it's pretty much turnkey right now. So
Sounds good.
that's it.
Anything else from the public? All right, all those in favor of closing, of granting the one-year extension, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Okay. Continued enforcement hearings. David Howe, 0 Vineyard Street, map 45-02-000-479, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for violations of the order of conditions, specifically special conditions 8, 9, 12, 18, and 19, including the unpermitted cutting of restoration plantings in accordance with DEP number 25-4265.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the board granted this order of conditions in the spring of 2017. If some of you remember, it was a dune restoration project, removing the invasives of the dune and replanting. The board, and along with some beach nourishment work, the board granted the permit with several conditions in regards to the beach nourishment and the dune restoration work. Within the past year, the staff has received several complaints about the work going on the property. There has been continued alteration to the coastal dune in violation of the condition that requires it to grow into its full and mature form. Staff did go out there and meet with the homeowner a few weeks ago. Yeah, a few weeks ago, to try to resolve some of the issues out there. The homeowner to our conversation, asked us to leave, and that resulted in this enforcement hearing. So unfortunately, we don't have any photos to show you, but some of the things we also noticed when we were out in the field was a landing that had been built at the end of the walkway. I've been told and was submitted a photograph that has been since removed. So that's a good thing. And some of the other issues we noticed on site is the proposed cedar tree that was supposed to be planted has not been planted. There's mulch along the boardwalk that was not permitted, and in the area between the fence and the road, there's been cobblestones set along the road, and that was supposed to be just planted with Amalthea beach grass, and it's now mulched with some plantings. So basically,
What are
in
the
addition,
plantings?
what?
What are the plantings?
I can't remember.
There are no
the rows.
plantings.
Oh, there are no plantings, just mulch? Okay, just mulch, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of an adjacent property. But, in addition, one of the conditions was because Hickey Landscaping had presented the restoration project to you, one of the conditions with that Maria Hickey Landscaping was to be the sole entity unless permission was granted by this board for another entity to perform some of the restoration work and dune work, and that was not done. And we were alerted several times to an additional landscaping crew to be out there. When we met with Mr. Howe, the property owner, he informed us that there were members of his employees of his business. So that was also in a violation. So right now, the dune is being kind of maintained at a height, I don't really know the height, I'm sorry. It's kind of uniform right across. Plants don't grow like that, so obviously it is being manicured and altered. So those were kind of the issues that required the staff to reach out to Mr. Howe, and then after the site visit, it was clear that we needed to bring this to the board's attention and schedule this hearing. Okay?
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Andrew Daniels. I'm an attorney for David and Karen Howe. Mr. Howe apologizes he wanted to be here tonight, but he's got some medical issues he's taking care of. He also wanted to extend his apologies to Ms. McKay, and I think he already called. I think unfortunately he took out his frustrations with his neighbor on the board. And that's kind of the genesis of a lot of this is a neighborly dispute. I'd invite Jennifer back out. She can take a look. I have Maria Hickey here. She can talk about the current status of what was done and the success of the project to date. But I mean, you know, again, a lot of this is a result of the neighborly dispute and why Mr. Howe is having his own people out there, because we need a police detail, and Ms. Hickey's crew is quite frankly frightened to go out and do the work anymore. So, I mean, we can go through one by one, but that's really where we're at this point. I would note on the tree, I mean, we've talked about the tree. We have 3 years to perform the work, and I was just talking with Marie. Yeah, the tree has not been installed yet, but the tree will be installed at some point within the 3 years.
Can I ask you what has happened that has made the homeowner think that they need a police detail or somebody in serving that capacity?
In a public forum, there's been significant aggressive behavior towards Maria and her staff, to the point where we got a police detail last year when the work was done.
Certainly.
Good evening, Maria Hickey Landscapes. I think you all know that I love plants. And I love what I do, and I would love to do this for many, many years. I felt highly, highly threatened by the neighbors. I went out there, I have pictures of everything. I met with Jeff Johnson from Holmes and McGrath and my foreman out there on May 11th. We were slated to start the project that day. Jeff and his crew were, just going over the final parameters with us. And I had my truck parked on the side of the road in a very narrow space between the edge of my truck and the split rail fence. And I had the window on the driver's side. My car was pointed towards the vineyard. I had the window open with the whole site plan laid out on my seat. So if I had any questions, Jeff and I could stand at my truck and look in, because it's windy out on the site. And there's about this much space between the edge of my truck and the vegetation. And the neighbor's husband came charging into that space and in an aggressive way and bumped me. And I was like, I've never had that happen before. And I said hello to him, and he started, screaming at me about how I should be ashamed of what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. Like, basically attacking me for being there to do my job to vegetate this dune. And we had to put off starting the project. The client has home security cameras, and he saw the whole thing. And they called me, and I believe that they issued a no trespass order against the husband because of this. And I didn't feel safe and comfortable going out there to do the project based on how out of control his behavior was. So the client said, I'm gonna order a police detail and you can do your work. We planted it, it came out fantastic. I don't remember the exact head count, but we put a couple of, at least, 250 to 300 native shrubs in. And the area out by the road, I hadn't put the beach sand and the beach grass in because there was a grave concern, and I had talked to Mark about this, that the fishermen that fish out on the jetty, they park on this shoulder of the road. And I was like, they're gonna park in the beach grass and ruin what I do. What do you want me to do? And it was one of those things we never really probably followed up enough on it. And the client said that they would mulch it and put cobbles so that people wouldn't park there, just to protect the plantings so that we don't get an issue of people driving through the plantings. Anyhow, to fast forward, he knew how uncomfortable I felt about doing work out there, and he actually called me a bunch of times, like in June, to see if I would work with him on the landscaping of his house, and I just was, not real eager. I have plenty of clients, and I don't want to be in a situation where I'm attacked by a neighbor for doing my job. Fast forward to tonight, he called me and asked if I would come, if there were any questions that needed to be answered, and I was having a private client meeting with the attorney at the end of the hallway around the corner, and the wife, came down and started yelling at me to the point, Jen had to come down and tell her to be quiet, and she was like, I have a right, it's a public place. And I was like, we're having a private meeting. So again, it just supports the fact of how aggressive their behavior is, We did everything correctly in our plantings, in our initial maintenance. He sent in his own crew, unbeknownst to me, but that was to this bittersweet that's in the dune that's growing that we initially moved. They told me that's what they removed again. I have my pictures from my monitoring report in June, and it's a heavily vegetated and lush landscape with Rosa virginiana and bayberry and beach grass. I didn't notice that it was a perfect height, but the plants are a year old. So I don't know that you're gonna see like huge disparity in the heights and the Bayberry at a year. You definitely will at like year 2 and especially year 3. And I hadn't put the cedar in yet because we had so many storms in March that knocked down so many cedars, to be honest with you. I probably planted like 200 cedars this spring, and I ran out of inventory of what I had. And then it went from like 47 to 87 in June. I don't know if anyone, Maury, I'm sure you probably remember that, right? So I planned to do it, and then all of a sudden it was hotter than you know what, and I was like, okay, that's a death sentence if I put the cedar in there now. So the plan is to do it this spring. You know, hopefully we don't have any more nor'easters, but I'll make sure that I have one held aside for this property. And again, you know, this is probably the first time in over 20 years that I've ever had a situation like this. Everyone usually likes me. You know, I've never, you know, had somebody literally charge after me and scream in my face. So, again, I know that Mr. Howe is remorseful and apologetic for when I did meet out there with Brendan and Jen, and he, at that point, had just had enough of the neighbors, basically. It's just been this escalating situation that goes back and forth. So hopefully I've answered any questions that you may have, but I just wanted to say that I've never felt as threatened as I have working on this job site, and it's unacceptable behavior, and that's all I have to say. Thank you. Any questions?
Maria, does, Jen?
Just a few clarifications.
Yeah.
In regards to a neighbor dispute, that's not what this board, that's not what we're presenting. It's
Sure.
an unfortunate situation out there. You know, I feel sorry for all parties involved.
Yeah.
That said, I just want to just touch base on a few things you said,
Sure.
Maria.
Yeah.
The issue the staff has right now is the continued maintenance of the dune where it's supposed to be allowed to grow into its full and mature form.
Yeah.
Mr. Howe told us when we were out in the field that his crew was removing the poison ivy. You're saying they're removing the bittersweet. Are they even trained to know what bittersweet is?
I think they know what bittersweet is because they do his landscaping at his other
Okay.
properties.
All right, still. the
I wouldn't think
board
anyone in
needs
their
to
right mind would want to
make-
touch poison ivy.
Nobody should be in the dune doing anything. That's the issue.
And he knows that now. I've had a very frank conversation with him
I am
because
not done.
it's my name on the
Yes.
permit, you know?
Yes, it is. And this board needs to approve any alternate entity that will be working out in the resource area that they're
Yeah.
charged with protecting, and it's under their jurisdiction, the board's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Second, you cannot prevent somebody from parking on a public road. Vineyard Street is a public
Okay.
road. The cobbles have to go. Unless the
Okay.
cobbles have been approved by the town,
Okay.
they need to be removed.
Yeah, and I didn't install those, but
Yep, and I'm not saying you did, I'm
Yeah.
just saying it's a
Sure.
public road, you can't prevent somebody from parking along a public road. Unless there's some sort of emergency vehicle
yeah.
obstruction.
Can I ask a dumb
and-
question? When I put in the sand and the beach grass, are we allowed to put like stakes like every 2 feet and then run ticker tape or something just so people don't park on the beach grass and
It's in our
destabilize?
public road layout, that's something you would need to discuss with the engineering department.
Okay,
It's not a conservation
Yeah.
issue. I mean, I don't want anybody parking on the plantings, we have that issue all
Yeah.
over town, but that's also something that you would need to take up. Like I said, it is a public road, there is a
Yeah.
public road layout that extends beyond that pavement, 10 feet beyond the pavement, so that is the road layout owned by the town. And what was I gonna say? There are other issues. We have mulch along the walkway that should just be grass. There's a
Yep.
little mulch area where the little wood pile stand is. I'd much rather just have the mulch removed and see that sand. I have no
Perfect.
issue with the little wood pile being there.
Yep.
Or don't put the mulch on the beach. I mean,
I'll let them know that,
yeah.
yeah.
that should be removed. So, I mean, I think the staff's major issue is the continued maintenance of the dune, and that needs to cease and desist. Okay?
You got it.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing,
Sure.
and Brendan just brought it to my attention. When the beach is being cleaned in accordance with the beach nourishment activities,
Yeah.
conditions, they need to mark mean high water.
Okay,
And we need to make sure that 10% of the rack is left
Left
for
behind,
the
yep.
migrating shorebirds.
you got it.
Okay?
That's easy stuff.
And I think also your client does need to let us know who's going to be performing his beach maintenance activities in
Okay.
writing. I need the contractor's
Okay,
name, if it's part of his construction crew or landscapers.
Sure.
We have pictures of a little machine they're using out there. We'd like to know that information.
you got it,
Okay.
you got
Thank
it.
you.
But from here on in, from this moment forward, he's well aware, and he
Well,
agrees.
this board
No one's
has
stepping
some
into that.
steps and conditions and options they have available to them.
You got it. Thanks.
So basically, this board could issue a cease and desist basically on a number of the activities, the beach, the dune. You could revoke the permit. I think at this point, that you have all options available to you.
And to
Um,
remove the mulch.
Oh, yeah, remove the mulch.
Yeah, we're in a window that we
Yeah,
can plant the beach
remove the
grass, so
mulch,
we can
the
remove and replace
cobbles,
right away.
Remove the cobbles.
Yeah.
Plant the beach grass along the beach as proposed in the plan. Excuse me, I might sneeze. And cease and desist cutting on the bank, short of revoking the entire order of conditions because of the violations. I think that's a way to go. And let's see what happens going forward. And if there's a continued issue out there, then we can revisit and possibly revoke the entire permit. But right now, I would just do a cease and desist on cutting and requiring them to follow all conditions in the order.
Well, I'll make a motion to that, and I just had one more suggestion, that if Marie isn't gonna be doing the work and his landscapers, or they both are gonna be doing work, that maybe the staff has a site visit and tell them to go out and show you a piece of bittersweet. Maybe we need an identification.
We could do that.
Yeah, I mean, Just-
Mr. Howe's landscapers, employees could work under Maria's direction.
okay,
That's fine.
but it sounded
But-
like she doesn't wanna go out there anymore, so.
And that's fine, then Mr. Howe's employees can come meet with the staff and we can determine whether or not they are capable of handling
she
a
understands
sensitive
it, but
resource
Yeah, I
area.
understand.
They're not gonna understand it.
Yeah,
So I'm just concerned that, we might just write it in that, somehow, she came to every hearing,
yep,
knows of what was going on, and now it's as if, now that she's out of the picture, we've got a free-for-all out there cutting.
Coastal dune restoration and maintenance is a little different
Yeah.
than general landscaping practices.
I think
Yes,
going
sir.
forward, we'll take precautions that it will be under Maria's direction. I would just like to add that the particular staff that was out there from Mr. Howe's company, they weren't just landscapers. I mean, they have done both wetlands restoration and installation work and invasive removals.
I'm not aware of
In
that.
some instances on a very large scale, so.
Okay, well, under
but-
the order, they need to,
Obviously, they didn't know how to
You
read the
know.
order.
And we,
speak with the staff and get the staff support.
and I completely appreciate that at this
Yep. We're not aware of their credentials, Attorney Daniels, so it's hard for us to,
And I appreciate that. I
Evaluate
just
that.
wanted to suggest that we just didn't throw anyone out there.
okay, no, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Second?
Wait, please. And a second. Okay, anything else from the board at this time? All right, anything from the public?
My name is Dennis Downey. I live at 49 Vineyard Street. I'm the terrible neighbor that they're talking about. Maria is a bald-faced liar to say that I ever bumped her, attacked her, or caused her to be intimidated. I spoke to her one time, and this is when I had just gotten off the phone with the regional director about, as you may recall, we came and opposed their original plan, which was to remove every plant on that dune and to cut down all the trees, okay? And when I spoke that night, we went home to our house, and David Howe, who lives somewhere else, but who has speakers outside of his house and lights outside of his house, blasted his music as we came into the driveway. The police, I'll be watching you. And we've suffered lights flashing on our house. Maria just told my wife, you deserve to have lights flashing on your house. So-
I'm gonna interrupt you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I appreciate that you would like to tell your side of the story.
So,
But
Jen does have
we can
pictures.
adjudicate this.
Fine, Jen does have pictures. Jen does have pictures from us that shows David's men cutting down the thing. It's not an accident. Maria has not been, I haven't seen Maria there until she was meeting Jen there. Jen got to meet David Howe, the real David Howe, and how he acts and treats other people, which was brutal. And that's what we've been enduring. So here's what I would ask. In addition to the special conditions, the violations, it also seems to me that there's a general condition there, that before any work was to begin, that this order of conditions was to be registered with the deed. That's a public record. As far as we can see from the public record, nothing was ever registered. So Jen should have a certificate, or no work should have been done on this. I don't believe that that was ever registered. Secondly, another condition was that they're supposed to be posted, the DEP number and the plans. That has never been the case. Maria, for all her experience and for being the front man for this, has not allowed that. I can tell you, a lot of people drive by, walk by, look at this place. We've lived there for 55 years. David has moved in there. He's got a different purpose. It's a party house for him a few weekends a year. He removed plants and put the mulch in, not because of the fishermen, but so that he would have more parking space, which is how he's used it all summer long. 4 or 5 cars there all weekend. His wife, his kids, him. They're the ones who are parking up on the dune. It's so easy to see what's actually happening here. He's actually doing what he wanted to do originally, which is to remove the natural dune and make a manicured garden. The stonework was never part of the original plan. If he was to do that, he was supposed to get a variance. He never got a variance, or Maria should know that. So, you don't need a policeman to protect from me. I'm not gonna go out and attack Maria or attack any of Dave Howe's men. We have been harassed by them, that's something else, but that dune is essential to the protection of his property and our property. I've seen storms that have taken down all of the vegetation, and you can see the roots going down 5, 6, 7 feet into what's left of the beach. That's what we need. If you put the stones on top of it, there's no roots going down. If you put mulch on top of it, there's no roots going down. Why are we doing that? Why are you cutting the trees to 1 foot? Anybody on the committee can go drive by tomorrow and see exactly. That's manicured, that somebody's going out and cutting it. Come on. And you do have pictures, Jen.
Yes.
You're not showing them tonight, but those pictures exist, and it shows their men doing it.
I'm saying we don't have, the staff did not take pictures when we were out on
Okay.
the site. I did not say they weren't in the record,
Okay.
sir, okay?
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the order of conditions was recorded. It was recorded on May 4th of 2017. It's right here.
Okay. So there was one police that came one time when they blocked off the street and threw some golf course sand onto the beach. I know the policeman for 20 years. He had nothing to do with protecting us or them. They've got nothing to fear from us. But we're not going to stand by and watch him just demolish that dune. Thank you.
Thank you. We do, is correct that there should be a sign posted?
Yes, there should. So Basically, Madam Chairman, if the board doesn't have any additional questions, I can outline what I can put in an enforcement letter. Okay, at this point, we can issue an enforcement order, but there's really nothing to restore. But we can issue an enforcement order as a letter, just outlining what they have to follow. Basically, the order of conditions and then the other issues that they have to resolve, which is removing all the mulch from the beach, removing the cobbles from the public way, removing the mulch from the public way. Okay.
And no
So-
further cutting.
And no further cutting. So yeah, I think we can draft it as an order with a letter and an order. I will sign it. You can ratify it at your November 28th meeting, but as soon as we write it up and sign it, then we'll send it off. Okay? And it'll cover everything that was discussed here.
I did actually,
The order or the work, conditions of the order that we're talking about, or?
yeah, no, I just want to let you guys know that I actually used a drill and put screws in to put the sign up on the fence. But I think what happened is the fence was might have been replaced, one of the posts was rotted, I don't know. But I have a photo of it on my phone. I take pictures of everything.
It should go back.
Maria, send me a picture of that, please.
You got it.
Email that to me. Thank you. Anything to add, Brendan?
These are simple things that should have been followed.
Very simple.
Mary Downey. I would ask you to revoke this license. There are things that have not been mentioned here. He put a walkway on the dune. He flattened the dune to put the walkway there. He has a rope walk like you're on the Survivor television show. None of that's being talked about. Both sides of the street have cobble. He has made a mockery of your order. It should be revoked.
Madam Chairman. I have a picture of the rope thing. In fact, Mr. Howe sent it to me. Where is it? That's that raft.
All right, so do we done with this?
If you want to see the picture of the rope walkway.
We're going to.
It's the mulch alongside the walkway. The walkway, you did permit walkway to be replaced in kind. Again, I haven't had a chance to measure it since we were asked to leave the property, but that's one of the things that we would have to do is measure the walkway.
All right.
12 posts, there were 12 posts that were never part of the original. 12 posts, like fence posts down at the ground.
Nothing like what.
Never in the plan.
Madam Chairman. There it is.
So now
That's the
you're,
only picture, Courtney, that was sent by Howe, showing us that he removed the landing.
so
But we
now,
haven't been able to go out and confirm
but you have
that.
permission now to go out there.
Can you say that for the record, Attorney Daniels? Thank you.
Sure, you have permission.
And my staff?
Yeah,
Thank you.
just coordinate with us. And
I'd
I
be
do.
happy to, Mr. Daniels, you just need to leave me your contact information, and I'd be happy to do that.
Certainly. And I know the hour's getting late, but I do feel that I need to respond to, besmirching someone's reputation. I know it's not the purview of the board, and I'm apologetic that the board even has to deal with some of these issues. But what I do know, with having worked with Mr. Howe for a couple decades now, is the projects that he embarks upon, and particularly his residences, he cares very, very deeply about. This isn't a mockery, this isn't a joke. He cares very, very deeply and feels actually honored and privileged to own a portion of the beach, and looks at it as a steward. So I have to respond to that. And I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've never been accosted in the hallway of a town hall before, but I have tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, all those in favor
Aye.
of issuing the force majeure, say aye. Opposed, unanimous.
I'm sorry, who moved it?
I moved it, they all did. No, I made a motion to, yeah.
Who seconded?
I think you, yeah, no,
Steve.
Steve seconded it.
Go with
Well,
Steve.
Put us all down.
What have you done? Oh, okay.
Next, we have,
Please.
Brendan, do me a favor. Go stand outside. Go stand outside. Start with
I drive by this.
152
This
Penzance
is
Road,
like
Woods
when I
Hole,
went in
for
with the
clearing and
ocean, I
altering
drive down
wetland
there.
resource area and in buffer to resource areas as defined in FWR 1000 and 310 CMR 1000.
Oh, Madam Chairman, this is a, sorry. This is a continuation of our, where's the little stick? Oh, okay. Can you bring the pictures back up? This is a continuation of the discussion we had last week regarding the violations out on 152 Penzance when we went out to discuss the restoration of, thank you, Mike. What's that? Oh, thank you. 160. Brendan's gonna bring up the photos that we, thank you, Attorney Daniels. I'll be in touch. Did you take my card the other day, sir?
I did.
Okay, great, thank you. Brendan's gonna bring up the pictures just to refresh our memory.
Which one do you want, Jen, before or after?
After's fine. After showing the wetland line. I think that's clear enough. I think the board all remembers. So, we did get a submittal from Mr. McGrath. Unfortunately, given the timing and everything, it was today. So you all should have a copy of that in front of you, as well as a copy of LEC's updated restoration narrative that was submitted late today. So if you look at Mike's plan, and forgive me, I'm looking at it. I did receive, Mike, one of the questions we had.
How I get to mine?
Oh, yeah, Brendan, can you help him get to his? I'm sorry. Let me just peek your head outside afterwards, please. So basically, there are just a few things the staff would like to go over. If you're all looking at this plan, Mike was nice enough to sit there and write a little title block for me. One of them, the word environmental is spelled wrong, so a gold star to whoever has that plan and can find it. Just a few notes. Mike, you said the hedgerow is going to be inkberry now, correct?
Yes.
So the privet's being removed. The staff would like to see the privet removed around the driveway as well. And that's not depicted in this plan. There was a substantial amount of fill put in that area as well. I did get Mark's submittal late today, and he says approximately 12 to 24 inches of soil is removed. So I'm hoping that includes a long wrapping around from the main driveway into the little driveway at 152. I think there are a few more slight modifications that were requested by the property owner that are not reflected in this plan, and I think Mike can go over those. But all in all, this is restoring the wetland. I think there is a timing issue that we might need to discuss. We put a November 30th deadline on both the wetland restoration and the buffer restoration on 160. They want to use the buffer restoration area
staging and stockpiling to remove the fill off of 152 as well.
Say the deadline again.
I think it was November 30th.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that doesn't leave us a lot of time.
That's right.
So the board will need to discuss that as well. I mean, there are other ways to get the fill off the site, so.
My name is Mike McGrath. I'm a professional engineer and land surveyor for Holmes and McGrath, and we filed these plans. This is a continued hearing on the enforcement. And normally, there's more time to review things, but we're trying to get the restoration work done at the same time or subsequent to the restoration across the driveway. So that's the reason I handed in revised plans just now. What we did last week is I had a plan, but unfortunately, the plan showed that the shed was bigger than it actually was. So we continued it. You also had some other questions. And the bottom line is we've spent a large amount of time trying to get you a workable restoration plan. And the current plan I just filed, we have been calculating the impervious areas before and after some activities. And the plan I just filed shows that all of these stepping stones, these are the ones that exist, and these were a proposed relocation, and the owner has decided to remove them completely. So that's what the latest plan says. I wanted to at least go over the changes in impervious area, and how I do that. We have an existing conditions that was from there's an order of conditions that covers both projects, and we filed an Exhibit A that was the existing conditions on the original plan of this, and I highlighted the applicable impervious areas. And then I gave you another exhibit that shows you the changes that have been occurred. And when I look at this, there's an increase in impervious area, and I submitted written testimony that said if these steppers were to stay, then there's an increase in impervious area, and we have to mitigate it for it. And part of the mitigation was in the restoration, I'm sorry, not in the restoration, but we were abandoning this long existing path, and we were, the total area of restoration here is 1,600, and I forget, I think it's 1,615 square feet. And the long and short of it is that we have now agreed to remove the steppers. I give you, the stepping stones, I gave you a new letter that says now we need to have a total of 69 square feet of increased mitigation, and the plan I filed doesn't show the steppers. As I said, what LEC has submitted a complete description of how they propose the work be done, and it's exactly the same as what's being actually accomplished across the street. The restoration plan came in today, and basically it's exactly what goes on across the driveway. They surround the area that's going to be excavated with erosion control, silt fence, straw bales, or wattles. Then any existing vegetation and soil that in the major areas will be removed. Then they excavate to get rid of the fill that's occurred in here. They're going to excavate and take out some of This is actually planted as grass, so there's turf grass throughout this. And so they're going to actually, remove some of that. They put in a special soil under the direct supervision of LEC, and they planted. LEC has given you a planting plan that describes wetland plants inside this area and then upland plants inside of this area. The plan that's currently now before you identifies that there's been 2 other alterations that are shown here, where apparently they had been stockpiling brush cutting and grass in the wetland. So that's been removed, and we're going to restore that. There is a wider area here. It's mostly upland, so we are showing the actual cleared area here. And LEC has provided you with the planting plan. And so I gave you copies of the planting plan as 11 by 17, and I did correct my mistake in spelling LEC environmental. So if you do find it spelled wrong, you get something more than what she said. So in any case, this is sort of rushed in a way, but at the same time, we're trying to get this done. The plants that LEC has used are basically the plants on the, and of course, I've given away my copy of the plan.
One of these.
I already did it.
Okay, thank you. Mike, did you say you're taking the stepping stones out?
Yes, there will be no stepping stones whatsoever.
So they're still on this plan, though?
It's, on this
On
one,
the-
it says to be removed.
Yeah, on the colored plan, I meant to write on there, stepping stones be removed, but the final plan I just gave you, and the letter that accompanies it, says the stepping stones will be removed.
Got it, I see it.
In the calculation. We've also agreed that the proposed hedges will not be the typical hedge, but will be a inkberry, so that you will not get the same type of hedge. I think what Jennifer's talking about is, earlier, there's an area in here that she and I discussed today, and I haven't had a chance to show that being restored. But if you go to the site, there are stakes. Now, this hedge that was planted is planted in a berm of topsoil and mulch. So there is fill at the location of the current berm with the hedge that has to be removed. And I think the photographs were pretty clear. There's a row of stakes that we've staked out on the former, that goes right across the lawn here. So, in any case, we have to get it restored. So the word proposed hedges, if you look at the LEC description, they actually describe it as 3 different species, but I believe the owner wants to put in the inkberry. So, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have concerning this restoration.
Thank you, Mike.
Oh, I did forget to say one thing. What the contractor is asked is, what he does is he excavates and removes the material, and he follows the direction of LEC. So his machine will be up on here, and later on it'll be in here, but it'll be a smaller machine. And what they then do is they transport that over to a place where they can then load it into a dump truck. So if you've been to look at the restoration across the driveway, he actually is using the former tennis court as a work area where they bring the material over there and then they load it in a dump truck. So what he'd like to do is use a portion of that area while he does this removal of the fill that's in this general area, and there's a little fill in this general area. So in any case, what might happen is that while the wetlands might be done, the buffer plants may not be quite complete by November 30th. We'll keep Jennifer appraised of the progress of the project. So, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right.
Just clarification, Mike, so you are gonna be planting the plants with, some wetland species, some upland species, why is my book
Yeah.
out all of a sudden? And that coastal, wetland mix, okay,
Yes, these are all wetland plants here.
yeah, okay,
And
I was
then
just wondering.
in the upland, it's from your list.
No, I understand. Mark did say that in an email that if I wanted some changes to the planting plan, that will, we can and modify it, and the only thing I noticed, was in the area where all that leaf dump, that little path that you said needs to be disturbed. Needs to be restored, yeah, that one right there, with the little hand. He's got viburnum dentatum in there, and I just think it might be a little too wet for that species, so I'll clarify that with Mark, and we'll figure out an appropriate species to plant there.
Mike, I just had a couple questions. I'm looking at the emergency plan we got on October 31st, and then this one. And for the mitigation, plant path for mitigation, I'm looking at the paths now. I'm looking at your first one, your calculations show all the paths filled in. Now we're keeping some of the paths up front
No,
still open.
no,
No.
all these paths are gonna be planted.
Well, it doesn't show that. That's why I was just questioning, just making sure, because on your new plan, you don't show the house end of the paths being planted.
Oh, no, they will be planted.
No, they look like they're being planted. The wetland looks like it's being planted behind that inkberry row. You're talking about then the paths, they're being planted with like a coastal wetland seed mix.
Oh, is that what the little teeny blue dots are?
Yeah. So, but the paths going down to
Are
those.
gonna have real vegetation?
Yeah, that's gonna
Okay.
all have real vegetation, several rows of vegetation.
And then my next question is, I looked at the narrative from the planting, and those, which is really nice, they're gonna be 4 to 6 inch and 6 to 8 inch caliper. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, 6 to 8 foot and 4 to 6 foot. The gum trees and stuff, they have enough room to get down there with the size of the ball, because those are good-sized trees. They'll do those first? Probably, all right, we'll just say yes, they will. They know how to do it.
I don't, they do.
Okay.
Just
You
nod,
don't,
Mark.
okay, and then, just in the narrative, I just want to be clarified, it says, if necessary, this is the fourth thing down in general note. If necessary, any required substitute native shrubs or native ground cover species shall be reviewed by the wetland scientist prior to the installation.
Which
And,
one are you looking at,
well, if
Mark?
they have to be this is
Under
on
general
page
notes,
2 of 2.
Fourth
Fourth one down, it says any required substitute, so I
Oh,
think the
got it,
staff
got it.
needs to know what the substitute is, not I'm glad the scientist is going to be there to know, but I think if it's something Jen isn't approving of, so that's all, I just wanna make sure that staff, maybe it should say staff and wetland scientist, or he can just contact Jen or something, but I don't think we
That's
should.
fine, I'll let Mark know.
I understand.
He's
that's
already
it.
reached
Okay.
out in his email to me with the attachment that we received today that, we'll communicate on
Okay.
any
All
substitutions
right, then the
that need
next
to
thing
be
is
made.
relocated landscape border hedge may be planted with inkberry, blah, 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 blah. And it says, and the hedge may be pruned to shape. Where is it going? I couldn't, it's probably right in front of me, but where is
mean?
that relocated, that whole length of privet going?
Right, this is the hedge that Jen and I have agreed it will not be. She doesn't want privet.
I understand that, but in your narrative, it says it's gonna be relocated.
Oh, I don't know where they're gonna bring the privet out,
Well-
relocate off-site.
Well, it doesn't say that. It says relocated landscape border hedge may be planted, blah, 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 blah. And the hedge may be pruned to shape.
Meaning the
that-
inkberry's gonna be pruned to shape.
Okay, not the hedge, the inkberry. Oh,
Privet's
okay.
going to be removed. They're
So
going to-
why are they pruning the inkberry?
Going to your
They're gonna prune it like a hedge?
That's what that says.
Well, I know that's what it says, I'm asking you. Is that all right?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so, all right. That's all, thank you.
Is any, Courtney, Kevin? Anybody down this way?
No, thank you.
All right. So,
Come on, can't we just fight about this?
Yeah,
Can't we what?
I don't mind.
I'm happy to fight, but I'd like some vague idea of what I'm fighting about.
Right.
we do it after the minute goes.
I'll fight for you, Kevin, how
Do
about
a-
that?
do a team
Not a
visit.
problem.
I do not
Mark,
have the file.
Excuse me, Mark would like to say something.
I just have one question. I couldn't quite figure out the hedge that's there along the side of the house away from the water. That's going to just move towards the house a few feet, is that?
Which
Or is it
hedge are
gonna
you
be
talking about,
removed?
Mark?
What,
The privet hedge that
Yeah.
we're.
Yes.
there's a privet hedge that's in here.
That has to be removed,
It has to be removed.
because that's
And-
planted in a wetland.
And what Jennifer is saying is that this should be a buffer plant that's in your regulations, and the only plant that's suitable in my mind is the inkberry.
Well, there are other plants,
was
but
the privet
to
removed?
achieve what the resident is looking for.
Going to be
yeah.
removed.
It's going to be removed.
Oh, going,
It
okay, I
exists.
thought you said it had been removed, and I saw it there last time I was there.
No, it hasn't been removed.
No, it hasn't been
we
removed
can't do
yet.
this work until you approve it.
Thank you.
And the thing wraps around the back of the shed and around that area of the
Right.
driveway.
Yeah.
And that all has to be removed too, and that's not depicted on the plan, but will be depicted in the order.
Yeah, if you go to the site and you were to stop here, you can see these stakes are at the,
In the privet hedge,
yes.
that depict the wetland line. That's all, Madam Chair.
All right.
So issue an order of conditions to restore the wetland in accordance
3
with these
feet.
plans.
Yes.
It's an enforcement
So-
out.
Yeah,
We
enforcement
use,
order, I'm sorry.
A motion.
Sorry, Mike.
I make a motion to have the restoration plan as discussed. For enforcement.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And so now we're left with one order of conditions to be voted. Stephen and Ann Sherman, 28 Nichols Road, East Falmouth.
Oh, here,
Madam Chair,
Brendan's getting it for you right now.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
am I on the quorum for
we're
this one?
checking right now.
Okay, the quorum.
If not, you may leave, if that's what you're
Peter,
getting.
were you here last week?
No.
Then you can leave. Bye, Peter.
Good night,
Steve,
Peter.
Mark, Mary, Betsy, Maury, Kevin.
Steve, bye, Jamie, bye, Courtney. Steve,
Hi, Jamie.
Mary, Maury, Kevin, Mark. Everybody who's not jumping off the table at this moment in time.
I don't have it.
That's why I picked that back up, because I bring it home and told them it happened.
Hang on.
I know it by heart.
What is this, 28 Nichols?
Yes.
So this is the addition. So currently, right now, your order of Mike,
I
Are
just
you-
took my
no,
trash.
I understand, you left your one you left one here last week.
We're gonna have lost and found for those things.
I thought I brought it with me, I'll try to track it down. I
No,
might have,
I think your staff gave me one.
yeah, good, okay.
Have a good night.
Thank
You too, Mike. So the original plan called for a much larger addition and required the trees to be planted between the addition and the seawall. The applicant appealed that decision. It is currently making its way to litigation. We've already had a DEP site visit, and And I do believe DEP issued a superseding order not requiring the trees, but that's DEP. And it still has to go to Superior Court. So they've come back to you with a reduced edition and are attempting to save one of those massive oaks that the board was concerned because all three of them are being removed. Remember the discussion? They were gonna try to save one. They're not gonna be able to save one.
Right.
So let's just, you know, kind of operate under the assumption that that tree is gonna be removed.
Right.
Right.
Either that or it's going to
Die. in a
die a
couple
very,
years.
very slow,
Painful
over the years, it will slowly die and become a danger to the house, cause it's
And
pretty.
then it'll be removed.
Yeah, and then it'll be removed. So I would operate under the assumption that the tree will need to be removed because the root systems are gonna become so damaged. And that's the project. And then they were going to replace the trees, except they weren't gonna replace them where the original order required them, which was between the addition and the house. They were more going over to the side.
Right.
And then they were moving the mitigation plantings that were in the west side of the lot, no, east side, and moving them, I think, because they're not required, because the addition is so much smaller, but then putting all of the mitigation plantings required along the wetland on the west side,
Correct.
Yep, you have it.
okay?
And the only other thing that we asked a question on my notes, the dock
Right.
in the aerial on page 15 is
Oh, yeah.
like 5 times bigger than the one that's
In the
on the
license.
plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think, and unfortunately, everything's hauled out of the water right now, but I
Right.
think that we need to make sure that that's not the real dock, because that's like.
What
10
page
times
is that?
Page 15. It's a Google Earth dated 4/14/2017. Showing clearly 3 docks and lots of other things. 3
Okay,
floats. And that was it,
okay.
But what's on the plan is
is one.
consistent with the license, correct?
I don't know, he doesn't
Oh,
have
we
a
don't-
license
oh,
number on it.
okay.
He didn't
So
put the
that needs
license
to
number.
be,
Clarified.
that should be clarified.
Okay.
And we also said, remind them that there's no fertilizer, not even Falmouth-friendly lawn, just no
There is no more
fertilizer.
they can't fertilize, according to the bylaw,
I'm just
the
telling you.
nutrient bylaw, they cannot fertilize.
It's actually in all.
It's
In
in
all-
all the
in all-
orders of
It's in all our
conditions now.
conditions.
Okay.
It's in one of your standard conditions.
Beautiful, thank
Two.
you.
2, yeah, actually, it's in 2 of your standard conditions. So, I mean, the question is this design and mitigation configuration more acceptable than the other one? I mean, that's
It's
the
much
bottom
better
line.
than the other one.
What? Yeah, you know, it's
Yeah.
smaller,
Yes,
so,
Smaller.
okay,
a
Then
little
that's-
taller, but
yeah, that's fine.
that's not our job.
Yeah, we don't look at height.
Right,
I always tell people that because of the flood zones, we push everybody up,
Right.
zoning pushes everybody down, so somewhere in the middle, we're gonna squish you like that. So,
39 feet.
okay,
There's
so
that.
And we're just
basically,
assuming that the
I
oaks
would-
are gone.
I would
That's what we're
operate under the assumption
Yeah.
that 2 of those oak trees will be required to be removed because the root systems are gonna be damaged on the one closest.
Should we,
And then the 3 white oaks will go in place. or
Yes,
whatever.
yep.
Right.
Right.
and will there be a
Big
time
white
frame
oaks.
on the planting of the white oaks? Just so they're not done. The problem is when they do it, like at the end
The
of the
white
3rd year,
oaks are
then you
located
can't go
so,
out there.
I mean, we can
They're
have
so
them
really
plant
far
them,
away.
yeah, they're far away, we can have them plant them prior to construction.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are they near any construction access, though?
No,
no,
no.
I don't think so.
Mm.
No, I don't
And they'll have the
believe
machine there to dig a big hole
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
versus getting all done and then,
There
you
you
know,
go.
there, okay,
How
perfect.
efficient.
Nailed it.
All right.
All right, I make a motion
Bring it
to
you.
accept the order as discussed.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I've lost my agenda. Oh, no.
Second.
Second.
All those in
Yeah.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And our,
Opposed,